Welcome back into the Believe podcast with your host, Dave. In the first episode, or the pilot episode, I kind of introduced myself, what I'm all about, and where I kind of, see the show going and all that jazz, right? And all that jazz. So definitely head on over and check that one out if you haven't already. This episode is going to be all about callings, and callings, or the call to faith in some way. And at the end of the first episode, I kind of recapped and I talked about what does that mean, right? And it's not always necessarily about a huge calling, right? I think, and again, talking about stereotypes, and we're bringing those up a lot. I think when people think about the call, quote unquote, the call to faith, again, I brought up the whole Whoopi Goldberg and Sister Act thing, right? Like, when did you get the call, right, to essentially like dedicate your life to faith or the church? And I honestly don't think, I think that's a stereotype. I think that's what people normally think of when they think of a calling, right? But I want to challenge that a little bit. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to fit that mold, right? I think it could be something much smaller. I think it doesn't necessarily need to be something that large where, and I feel like people feel pressured. Maybe they feel a little bit scared when they think about something like that. Like, oh my God, like, if I feel a certain way, then I have to go full bore, right? Like, I got to go like 1,000%, 0 to 100, and, take on this huge commitment to do something huge or something big, right? And I don't think that you necessarily need to do that. It could be something super tiny. It could be, somebody needs you at some point in time, right? Like maybe they're sick or they're recovering from something and you have an opportunity to be there for them. And I'm not, it doesn't necessarily also have to be like this feeling of obligation, right? Or just because, you're a good person, that doesn't necessarily, in my mind, kind of fit the mold of a calling, right? Like there has to be a little bit of extra zing on it, right? There's got to be a little bit extra something there. And that's why I also brought up in that first episode that signs kind of going along with, or they usually go along with, a lot of times they do, with a calling. As a calling to me is more of like a pull, like a draw towards something, right? For me, it's like you're getting this inclination that like, hey, maybe I should do something that isn't for myself, right? It's almost always not a selfish thing. It's more of a selfless thing that isn't about you. It's about at least one other person or trying to help out a bunch of different people or whatever. But it's never usually just about helping yourself. So for me, a good example would be to make this show. So let me give you a little bit of info into how I was kind of drawn into doing something like this. It's really odd, my wife and I were coming back from our anniversary trip, and literally this was I don't know. I think we came back maybe over a week ago now or something, but whenever I go further east in the world and then I come back west, I get hit with massive jet lag. And lately, especially if we're 8-9 hours ahead, when you go out, when you come back, I feel like it takes me like a straight week to get back. I'm like, falling asleep super early and then also waking up super early. And why am I telling you all this? Well, in that recuperation phase, which again was about a week ago now, I swear to God, it's only been less than a week now. I ended up just waking up early like I had been doing for like the past few days or whatever. And somehow, I don't know why or how, it just kind of popped into my head, to think about different topics. Now, I will preface this as well and say that I've been thinking about all of these topics for a really long time, since I've been young. essentially, right? And I'm nearly 40 right now anyway. But I've always thought about these topics before, but I never really thought to lend a voice to it or, make a show out of it or anything else like that. I have had discussions with certain people along the way that kind of hit on some of these topics, but never really thought about using my background in communications or being more, familiar with or comfortable with speaking up or lending a voice or, using these mediums that I have experience with to dive into these topics more. But for some reason, and again, less than a week ago, I just woke up early and I started thinking about these topics again. But for some unknown and goofy reason, I started thinking about them in the form of putting it into a show, and in particular, a podcast, which is what I'm doing right now. And, just kind of like running through these topics in my head and like what I would say and what I would talk about. And, for me, I think a calling, like I said, kind of wrapping it back around, I think a calling is this pull or this draw. You're kind of curious, right? You're like, well, like I want to do more with my faith, or I want to do something extra. I want to go further, right? I think a lot of people feel that in their faith journeys, right? That, can I be doing more? Can I be doing something else? When you hear about this is the first, I can't believe I didn't talk about it in the first episode, but talking about Jesus, right? Or talking about, I might refer to him as JC. My wife hates that, but whatever you call him, Jesus, Jesus, JC, Yeshua, whatever you want to call him. I think he kind of sparked that, right? Where, these calls to the church or even God too, right? Like you hear all these stories of these different saints about, come rebuild my church and all these other kind of things, right? And that's the stereotype. That's what you kind of associate with calls, right? Like this bigger call kind of thing. But I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. In particular, you have some sort of say over it as well. And that's what I'm trying to say about me diving into this medium is I think it's important to try and like have it push you outside of your comfort zone a bit, because it's not something that's just going to come super easy to everybody, right? And that's sort of the point, right? Like even with that stereotype, it's a massive undertaking, and I think there's a lot of doubt around trying to do something like that. But it could also be the same on a much more micro level, right? Like even for me here, it's just like, I don't know if anybody's going to listen to this. I don't know if I should jump into these topics, right? Who's going to care? Who's going to listen? Who's going to comment back? Right? Like, am I going to be able to get anything out of it? Am I going to be able to reach anybody by doing this? Especially with my failed experiments in the past with other forms of media, right? You definitely become deflated sometimes as well when you have a past and it didn't really work out the way you wanted it to. But anyway, all that's to say, you also have some control over it, right? Like I myself consider myself super introverted, not really the life of the party. That kind of stuff really exhausts me. However, laying down a podcast talking about faith-based topics is totally fine for me. Turns out it's actually not that bad. But this whole idea of like, do I really want to put myself out there and talk about my faith and talk about religion and these tough topics? I don't know. Like that's a hard one to try and wrap your brain around, right? So, I think these calls kind of have to fit into those categories, right? It's not always clear cut is basically what I'm saying. Like you're not always going to have, JC coming down in, in one of your dreams, or, quite literally in your everyday life, and, hitting you over the head saying, like, do this, I want you to do this, right? I think a lot of times, the majority of them are not really that way. I really do think that the majority of them kind of like fit into that category of, you feel this pull to want to do. It's sort of like an inkling almost, right? It's sort of like, a je ne sais quoi, like, and I don't know what, right? Like, you just have something that pops into your head, and for whatever reason, you can't seem to shake it, right? Like, you just keep thinking about it. So I don't want you to think that, oh, you literally just thought about this a few days ago and you want to, like, put it down into words. No, I have thought about these topics my entire life. I just wasn't sure if I should try to lend a voice to it and try to put myself out there. Now, without getting into it further, I think a lot of times, well, first of all, thou shalt not tempt the Lord, right? Like, you shouldn't test God, and you shouldn't test your faith. But I think, especially in times of doubt, in particular, weakness or pain and suffering in particular, there are times where we ask certain things of our faith, and we'll put a feeler out there, let's just say, and we'll say, hey, if this is really something that you want me to do, send me a sign, right? Now, I don't want you guys to think that this was in any way, shape, or form me showing any kind of like demands. Like, I wasn't like, shaking my fist up to the heavens going like, I need a sign or I'm not going to do it, and trying to be angry about it or send down any kind of ultimatums. It wasn't like that at all. And honestly, I've never really done anything like that or really have felt the need to do something like that before. I consider myself pretty lucky in my journey so far where, I haven't really put that much of an onus back to God or JC and go like, hey, you gotta show me something, right? Like, I never really had the need to do that before. But in this particular instance, I was kind of on the fence. I was like, well, like, I guess I could do this, but I am doubting it, and I'm not sure if this is really the right move for me. I got other irons in the fire. I got other things that I could be, putting my time towards. So do I really want to do this? Do I really want to jump in on this type of topic? And so I just kind of put it up there, and I was like, if you're not too busy, show me a sign kind of thing. So it wasn't like a half-ass kind of thing. It wasn't like a joking kind of thing, but it also wasn't serious, if that makes any sense. It wasn't like I was super angry going like, I'm not going to do this kind of thing, right? So it was one of those, like, hopefully you understand where I'm kind of coming from with that, but it was kind of like that, where I was just like, I'm on the fence. I'm not sure if I should do it. But if you could show me a sign, Lord, that would be awesome, kind of thing, right? And I kid you not, less than 24 hours later, I got my sign. And I'm not saying this to say that, like, if you're on the fence with your call, that you have to do the same thing. I don't think they're all like that, where it's like, you have to search for that sign in order to get confirmation, in order to do your call, kind of thing. I don't think all people fall into that. I think if you feel drawn enough to it and you want to do it, then do it. But for me, I was a little bit more on the fence. And man, oh man, did I get a sign. It was a big one. Again, I'm going to save that for another episode. I'm not going to dive into that right away, because I think it's cool, but it's also a different topic too, right? That we can really roll up the sleeves and dive into with a lot more time dedicated to it. So I'm definitely going to share that in the future, but not on this one. But let's just say, well, I'm here recording the episode now, so I got it validated well enough for me to act on that call. Let's just put it that way. So I don't want to get into the science even more. So, I mean, I have all these other ideas that are kind of popping in my head right now, but I don't want to talk about it just yet. So let's just circle back around to, so that was my personal example of a call. But again, this might be a huge undertaking for somebody else. This idea of like, wow, man, like you're creating a whole faith-based podcast around this one call that you had. That's insane. That's crazy. I'm not saying that you have to do something like that. I'm also, like I said, I'm not saying that, if you feel a pull to the church, that you have to drop everything and drop your whole lifestyle in order to join the priesthood and dedicate all your waking moments to your faith and to your religion. Now, I'm not saying that either. It could be anything. It could be super small stuff. Like I said, it could be, helping somebody out in need. It could be a pull towards some sort of volunteer work. I would say too, try to base it off of your strengths. Play to your strengths. Like what are you good at? What do you like to do? Maybe you're a writer. Maybe you're a poet, and you could slap some stuff together in a pamphlet and be able to give that out to folks in the right form, in the right space, to spread some joy out into the universe. Or maybe your call is to help the homeless, to go to soup kitchens. Maybe you're an excellent seamstress, or you like to knit. My mother-in-law loves to do that. Well, maybe you can make some blankets or hats or gloves or clothing that you can donate, right? I would say definitely play to your strengths. Play to what you're good at and what you already have an interest in, and see how you can utilize those strengths to put that back into your faith or back into the church. And that's a very easy gateway, I would say, to relaying that back to try and pay something forward. I think if you agree with me and you're listening to this episode, you're probably going to have a similar viewpoint, right? Or a similar idea where, somewhere along the line in your faith journey, you're going to have this idea that I have this pull, I have this draw, I have this feeling that I need to be doing more. I need to be doing something extra to try and give back. Like, I'm fortunate. I may be in a place where I'm good, and I know a lot of other people aren't. So what can I do to give back? All right, let's bring up something that's controversial right now, and talk about something that's been in the news a little bit more frequently, right? I don't want this to be a political show. I don't want it to be something that's going to spark some heated debate over the left or right or whatever. But no matter where you stand in that kind of space, I think in particular, if you are on a faith-based journey, if you are a little bit more religious, I think you're definitely going to be pulling a little bit more towards humanity, right? And towards people and caring for people, right? So maybe you felt the need recently to give back to certain communities who may have been impacted by certain events that had been going down. I really don't you can probably tell I'm trying to tiptoe around it as much as possible. That's going to be a whole nother bombshell of a show, an episode as well. But, again, it is a little bit more clear cut if you're talking about faith and religion. I think you're probably going to care more for human beings and trying to be there for them and trying to help out the less fortunate, rather than taking a harsher stance at times. So, and even if you're not, and even if you vote a certain way, it doesn't necessarily mean that you necessarily don't have a heart either, right? So I think you could have certain political stances, but you can also be kind-hearted. You could also want to give back. You could also want to help out people who need it. So I know that was super confusing. Probably didn't make a whole ton of sense. Maybe it did. Hopefully it did. But that's all I'll say about that. I really just want to focus in on, calls that will most likely just end up helping people out, helping the less fortunate out, trying to spread joy and happiness and kindness out into the world. That really, I think, is the crux or the basis behind all of these calls, and what these calls really mean. I really do believe that that's what it's all about, is this pull to do something more and to do something selfless, do something for other people. That's what Jesus, I think, is trying to tell all of us, and that's what we're all capable of doing, giving back and trying to better the world. Okay, this isn't a PSA for volunteer work. Again, that could be another show as well. This is really just about that feeling, right? That feeling that you can't shake, something that gets popped into your head that you can't shake. So I should always preface the episode. I don't know why I didn't do that. I should at the start of the episode, I should be asking for comments and then following up here at the end. But I'm going to cap it here at the end and say, as always, I want to hear from you guys. Have you had a calling? Or even if you don't feel like, oh yeah, this is a concrete thing that, God's asking me to do, is it sort of like something that you can't shake, right? Is it something that's been stuck in your head that you just can't stop thinking about, or keeps coming back around, right? Like maybe periodically it just keeps coming back around, or there could be like a pre-sign that, you're seeing certain things that spark this idea that keeps coming back around in your brain, right? I want to hear about those, as well as concrete calls, and have you acted upon them? Are you thinking about acting upon them? What are you thinking about for them? How are you planning on drawing off of your strengths in order and using those strengths in order to act out on that call? If you need help for that, this is what the community is all about. If you're on the fence about that, hit us up. Throw the comments in there. Let's start talking about them, and let's see if we can't provide more guidance for you. And maybe through the comment board, you might get your sign from somebody else, perhaps. I don't know. Let's see what we can shake up, and let's see what we can bring up here in the comments to talk about your calls. If you haven't heard the first episode, I also want to hear some comments on just your faith-based journey. All of these too, like, even though I may be asking for a certain type of comment for the show, you can bring up whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to be based on the show title or the topic of the episode that I'm talking about. You can just bring up whatever you want. I'd also want to hear too, in particular, if you're talking about calls, maybe you've heard about somebody else, maybe you know somebody else who got a call or is doing something awesome, doing something else off to the side, and you just want to give props to somebody else because you think it's really cool. I want to hear about that as well. Let's bring that up too. I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I think we're going to do it on that one. Again, with any comments, if you don't want your comment to be shared in a future Q&A episode, please write that at the bottom of your comment, like please don't share. as well as if you don't want your handle name or your name that your username that you're using shared, you could say something like, "Please don't use my name." You can use the comment, but you don't use my name, something like that. But yeah, hit up this show on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. I think those are the most common for comments. And let's get that discussion going. I want to hear from you. But I think that'll do it for this one. I don't have a precursor for the next episode for this one for you guys. But trust me, I got a lot that I want to dive into. I'm just recording these first two episodes in one night, so I'm gonna recoup for a little bit and see what I want to talk about next. But I think we're gonna start potentially getting into those tougher topics next. I think we've had a nice easy introduction into some of more of the feel good kind of stuff. Now let's see if we can throw a curveball in there for the next episode and shake it up. I don't really know what it's going to be, but now I'm kind of putting pressure on myself to get into get into a juicy one next. But thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening this week. And again, hit up those comments, and I will talk to you on the next one.